Okay, it's a pleasure for me to be here with you, and of course I would like to thank you to organizing institutions for this timely event, and also for the WTO for hosting this event. There are several questions which are interrelated for session 2, starting with the main one, how to ensure that the proliferation of regional trade agreements and now mega-regional agreements strengthens multilateral trading system. Well, maybe we can reformulate the question I just reformulated to ask, how could the WTO strengthen the mega-regional trade agreements to keep them more in the multilateral side? I mean, how to curb the challenges that these initiatives can bring into the multilateral system. I have some very humble ideas on these, but I will just go through, first of all, how we developed the intellectual ideas about the regionals and multilateralism. Of course, there are several graphs that we can produce. This is one of them. The RTAs are recurrently proliferating. Well, they continue as trade growth rises, and they continue as trade growth declines after 2008. So what are they for? This is not my basic question today, but just to make a reference to Professor Lehman for this morning, is there any gap that they can fill in governing between technology and markets and what's going on now today with respect to the problems of global trade today? Well, we don't know. Of course, they have such ambitions and very big, ambitious mega-regionals we have today, and all these have sometimes having such ambitious ideas of being game changers. So what does it mean? And of course, there had been several explanations for the motivations of RTAs. I will not go through all of these, but what I can say is that every motive is developed as a response to something, maybe to the negotiating and rule-making functions of the WTO system. So, but whatever it is, the motivation, a better regulation of RTAs is a necessity. Because there are implications for non-members, they have diversionary effects, and that the WTO, for the WTO, it may be a source of concern. Anyway, so how the debate evolved, starting with very early 1990s, concerning, everybody remembers the building and stumbling blocks debate based on the spaghetti ball effect. Then we had the very brilliant idea of multilateralizing regionalism. Of course, the regionalism is here to stay, and the focus on the gains from coherence between multilateralism and regionalism is a must. Then we had very good ideas about what will be the implications for third countries if we have, especially in the post-mega RTAs period, the indirect spillovers Ulrich mentioned, some of them when third countries purposefully adopt the regulatory standards and procedures of these mega RTAs. And then we had a very nice study by Joost Paulin, who will be here in the afternoon, the mega RTA as a provider of public goods. Well, they can somehow, for some reasons, why they explains the reasons why TTIP, specifically as a mega RTA, TTIP concessions may leak or to benefit also to third countries. I'm not sure whether this happens automatically. We need some more efforts to provide these leakage and benefit for the third countries. So, embarked on these ideas, maybe we should have more debate, especially within the context of T20, and to bring more intellectual ideas about how WTO could play a role in this process of providing these indirect spillovers for third countries, at least to make them, the mega regionals, more functioning and more in line with the multilateral system. Well, of course, we have to, first of all, remember the main challenges posed by the mega RTAs. They have two parts: diversionary effects, as we all know. Well, preferential tariffs, they're getting down, all the tariffs, so the preferential effect will be minimal. Not for all countries, of course. So it changes from one country to the other. The second aspect is the negative spillovers, what I call as sometimes complying with these standards of mega markets is not very easy and may raise the production costs, what I call as the compliance cost for third countries in terms of standards, environmental and labor standards for the sake of leveling playing field or IPR, etc. So how could we help the non-members to achieve positive spillovers then? Of course, the problems, just to make it more clear, could be to solve a very old problem, growing complexity of the rules of origin, and of course the 21st century issues like regulatory cooperation, how to achieve this, because we know that there are empirical studies also indicated that TTIP reduces trade in NAFTA, in Turkey-EU trade, and even within the European Union, Germany's trade with the southern members like Greece, Italy, Spain. So we have to be cautious in accepting that the standards as global standards that are set up only by the EU and the United States, but who sets the rules are as important matters as much as the rules themselves. So how to be more inclusive in developing and providing more coherence and regulatory cooperation in that sense. An inclusive approach, that's one of the ideas to make the inclusiveness in the G20 meetings. But within that context, I put the inclusiveness as being an open regionalism, but how to provide accession and docking for third countries. Not necessarily being members of the system, of the RTA, but how they can achieve positive spillovers. So that's true that an exclusive trading bloc with a close membership will not be contributing to the multilateral trade system, that's for sure. So how about the mega regionals then? For TPP, yes, it's theoretically could be open to any APEC member, but is it so an automatic accession for China? I don't know. For TTIP, well, there are many explanations, but just as a case for Turkey, for example, the quest for Turkey's quest for membership to TTIP is not very welcomed, and it's not very clear in which ways Turkey can dock itself into this system. Yet an open mega RTA still may not attract some members. On the other hand, if the precondition is to adopt all the acquis, but it's not a very easy process. So what policy options we have for third countries, that has also been debated very heavily in the literature, in intellectual circles, to make the WTO again, revive the WTO system and engage with multilateral regulatory agenda. That's not very easy. It has, if it has been easy, then we would have a much successful Doha round. So engage with plurilaterals. That could be one way, of course, but plurilaterals only for specific sectoral issues. So how about regionals? Well, I'm not sure. I agree with what previously Professor Simon Evans said. A dominant regionalism may not be the case, and may not work, or sometimes make the things even more messy. A rival RTAs could also make the things more complicated. So countries are expected to have domestic unilateral reforms to raise up their standards so that they can have access to RTA mega markets. But how to comply with the standards? That's a very costly and lengthy procedure that I think the WTO and in these circles in T20 we should bring more fresh ideas on how we can achieve such steps to make the spillovers more feasible and manageable for third countries. So the WTO could be used as a provider for global public goods in providing this, in assisting. For example, the WTO assists in mitigating the negative spillovers and boosting positive spillovers. And it could start a discussion for less stringent regulatory measures, whether through the mutual recognition agreements or not, and review its principles in reducing diversionary effects. And, of course, measures the impact of mega RTAs more accurately. Just to say a few words for each, and then I will stop. Maybe we need a chapter in every mega RTA on multilateralization. In that chapter, to discuss the methods to encourage member states to include at least this kind of chapter for RTAs which comes above a certain threshold of global trade, should provide evidences, at least how to blunt trade diversion, or mechanisms by which the accession could be possible for third countries. Sometimes it's not very clear. And impact assessment analysis should be made regularly because we cannot all of a sudden measure all the impact, but we need some time, of course, for some events to happen. And mechanisms for third countries to adopt global standards. That goes to regulatory cooperation. And maybe an RTA adjustment facility to compensate non-members, especially the developing and least developed countries, in improving their capacities to adopt higher standards. And these beneficiaries can be determined according to certain criteria for which the WTO Committee on the RTAs could work on. And of course, this facility should use methods for regulatory cooperation. Maybe a separate body or a council could be established for regulatory cooperation, and more open consultative mechanisms are necessary to hear the voice of third parties in their difficulties achieving higher standards. That has been a case for Turkey, for example, during its customs union process, where Turkey had some kind of cooperation with the EU in aligning the European standards. But sometimes even this mechanism does not work very efficiently. So therefore, this consultative mechanism under regulatory cooperation is quite important one. And of course, less stringent and more flexible rules of origin for third countries that allows cumulation principle beyond maybe a product by product basis. And we should also consider whether changes that occurs in the headings or in the change of the chapters, which one is more stringent or not. That's an important item. And of course, we have as far as rules of origin are concerned, listing some significant third countries that has a substantial trade in inputs with the US, with EU, with protagonists of the TTIP or other mega regionals is quite important, because they are very deeply integrated into the global value chains or the value chains. And of course, a modeling on the pan-Europe Mediterranean cumulation system could be assessed for that purpose. And finally, the impact assessment reports. We have a lot of impact assessment reports, and sometimes we all know that these impact assessment reports really say something, but may differ the case from one country to the other. But we need reports, a more standardized assessment for mega regionals that could be done or studied at WTO level, which could include a wider elaboration to consider economic, social, environmental, human rights, and institutional aspects. By institutional, I also mean the impact on the WTO system. Well, the TPRM is a good exercise, which could also informally be started for mega regionals then to review what goes on in these mega regionals, just like in the member states of the WTO. I would like to thank you, and I finish it now. Thank you.